October 17, 1942. The frigid waters of the North Atlantic churned beneath the gray hull of HMS Badsworth, a British convoy escort vessel cutting through waves under an oppressive blanket of fog. In the cramped galley below deck, ship's cook first class Edward Mackenzie wiped sweat from his brow as he prepared another batch of tea for the weary sailors on watch, unaware that his irritation with the ship's antiquated equipment would soon lead to one of the war's most unexpected breakthroughs. Admiral James Wharton, safely ensconced in his London office, was at that very moment confidently assuring the Admiralty that their newest sonar countermeasures would reduce convoy losses by at least 30% in the coming months. How tragically mistaken he would prove to be. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. This is the remarkable account of how a simple galley cook with no formal education would challenge the Royal Navy's finest scientific minds and develop a countermeasure that would save thousands of lives and millions of tons of vital war supplies, transforming the Battle of the Atlantic through nothing more complicated than kitchen waste and an obstinate refusal to accept defeat. The HMS Badsworth rocked violently as another North Atlantic wave crashed against its bow. Lieutenant Commander Geoffrey Hartley steadied himself against the bulkhead, his eyes fixed on the convoy spread out before him. 27 merchant vessels in neat columns, carrying everything from ammunition to butter, tanks to medical supplies, the lifeblood of Britain's war effort. As escort commander, Hartley knew the grim statistics all too well. Since January, German U-boats had sunk over 300 Allied ships in these waters. More than 2,000 sailors had perished, some freezing to death in lifeboats, others swallowed by the merciless sea within minutes of their ships being torpedoed. "Sonar contact, sir," called out leading seaman Phillips from his station. "Bearing 270, distance uncertain." Hartley's jaw tightened. "Probable classification? Can't say for certain, sir." Signals distorted. Phillips adjusted his headphones, his young face creased with concentration. Could be a U-boat, or could be nothing. That was the trouble with sonar in 1942. Reliability remained frustratingly inconsistent. The new Type 271 radar helped spot surface submarines, but once submerged, the U-boats became ghost-like apparitions, flitting in and out of sonar detection. False positives wasted precious fuel and left other sectors of the convoy vulnerable. False negatives were even costlier. Down in the galley, Cook Mackenzie cursed as another roll of the ship sent a pot of coffee sliding across the counter, narrowly missing his assistant, ordinary seaman Walter Jenkins. "Steady there, Jenkins," Mackenzie said, catching the pot. At 42, Mackenzie was considerably older than most of the crew. With 23 years of Royal Navy service, he had joined as a boy seaman in 1919, too late for the previous war, but in time to build a career feeding sailors across the globe. "Sorry, Chief," Jenkins replied, using the informal title for the ship's cook. "How many more thermoses to fill?" "4 for the bridge, 2 for the engine room, and 3 for the sonar boys," Mackenzie replied, his thick Scottish accent intensifying as it always did when he was busy. Poor lads, straining their ears for hours on end, listening for those German devils. As he spoke, Mackenzie dumped a bucket of food waste into the ship's disposal unit. Potato peelings, tea leaves, fish bones, and the greasy water from that morning's porridge. Standard procedure called for such waste to be discharged overboard during nighttime hours only, to prevent creating a visible trail in daylight that might attract enemy attention. In the sonar room, leading seaman Phillips suddenly ripped off his headphones, wincing in pain. "What is it?" demanded his supervisor, Petty Officer Arthur Wellesley. "Bloody awful noise, sir," Phillips explained, cautiously replacing the headphones. "Like someone scratching a blackboard right next to my ear." Wellesley took the spare headset and listened. The normal ping return of active sonar was now accompanied by a bizarre distortion, a crackling, hissing interference that obscured any clear returns. "How long has this been happening?" Wellesley asked. "Started about 2 minutes ago," Phillips replied. "It's everywhere. Can't filter it out." Wellesley frowned. "Could be some new German jamming technology. Make a note in the log and continue monitoring. I'll inform the bridge." Lieutenant Commander Hartley received the news with grave concern. German technological advances had been a constant threat throughout the war. First the magnetic torpedo, then improved U-boat designs, and now possibly sonar jamming. He ordered an immediate alert status for all escort vessels in the convoy. Unknown to anyone aboard, 5 miles away U-612 under Captain Lieutenant Heinrich Schaefer was indeed stalking the convoy. The Type VIC U-boat, one of Germany's newest, had been shadowing the merchant ships since dawn, waiting for optimal attack conditions. Hydrophone report, Schmidt. Schaefer ordered his sound operator. Oberleutnant zur See Karl Schmidt adjusted his equipment. Convoy engines detected, Herr Captain. Multiple vessels, estimated bearing 045. But, he paused, adjusting his dials with growing frustration. But what? Schaefer demanded. There's interference, Herr Captain. I cannot get accurate distance readings. Something is disrupting our passive sonar. Schaefer, a veteran of 12 patrols and responsible for sinking 11 Allied vessels totaling 62,400 tons, moved to the hydrophone station. Taking the headphones, he listened intently. What he heard was baffling. The expected propeller sounds were there, but surrounded by a cloud of acoustic chaos that made precise localization impossible. Is it possible they've deployed a new countermeasure? Asked the first watch officer, Oberleutnant Werner Keller. Perhaps, Schaefer replied cautiously. With 27 men under his command and fuel for only 4 more days at sea, he couldn't afford mistakes. We'll maintain course and try to close distance visually if fog permits. Record these sounds for analysis back at base. Back aboard the Badsworth, no one had yet connected the sonar anomalies to Cook Mackenzie's waste disposal. The mystery deepened when other escort vessels reported similar interference. The convoy commodore, Captain Richard Denton aboard the merchant vessel Empire Trust, ordered an emergency meeting of escort commanders. 3 possibilities, Lieutenant Commander Hartley told his fellow officers in the wardroom of the Badsworth. 1. Atmospheric conditions affecting equipment performance. 2. Coordinated German electronic warfare. 3. Equipment failure across multiple vessels, which seems statistically improbable. Lieutenant James Morrison from HMS Vanquisher, another escort destroyer, shook his head. My sonar operator swears it's like nothing he's ever heard before. Started suddenly, no gradual degradation as you'd expect from equipment failure. As they debated, Cook Mackenzie arrived with tea and sandwiches, nodding respectfully to the officers before retreating to his galley. His mind was on dinner preparations. Feeding 156 men on wartime rations required planning and creativity. Jenkins, he called to his assistant, run down to stores and fetch those tins of corned beef. We'll need to stretch the meat ration with extra potatoes tonight. As Jenkins left, Mackenzie began cleaning the galley. The disposal unit was backing up again, a common problem on escort vessels that had been hastily converted from civilian use. Following his usual procedure, he added a strong degreasing agent to break down the accumulated waste before flushing the system. In the sonar room, Phillips suddenly straightened. It's clearing, sir. Interference is fading. Wellesley verified the observation and reported to the bridge. For approximately 40 minutes, the sonar had been effectively compromised, but now readings were returning to normal. Lieutenant Commander Hartley ordered a full sweep of the surrounding waters. Contact, Phillips called out minutes later. Definite submarine signature. Bearing 275, distance approximately 3,000 yards. Hartley didn't hesitate. Action stations. Hard to starboard. Engine room, full ahead. Prepared depth charges. The Badsworth's response was immediate. Bells rang throughout the ship, sending sailors racing to battle positions. In the galley, Mackenzie secured loose items and prepared for possible combat. He had been through dozens of alerts, some real, some false alarms. Either way, his job remained the same. Keep the galley functional and be ready to assist with damage control if necessary. 5 miles away, U-612 was now in serious trouble. As the acoustic interference had cleared, Captain Lieutenant Schaefer had ordered periscope depth, hoping to verify the convoy's position. They had emerged directly into the path of HMS Badsworth's newly functional sonar. Emergency dive, Schaefer ordered as the lookout reported the fast-approaching destroyer. All hands, silent running. Flood negative tank. The U-boat angled downward, but not quickly enough. The first depth charges exploded 100 meters from U-612 stern, close enough to shake the vessel violently and crack several gauge faces. The second pattern came nearer, at 50 meters, causing minor hull damage and disabling one of the diesel engines. Depth? Schaefer demanded, his voice steady despite the danger. 140 meters, Herr Captain, reported the diving officer. Maximum safe depth for this vessel is 200 meters. Schaefer knew their only hope was to go deep and silent. For the next 4 hours, U-612 evaded increasingly accurate depth charge attacks, sustaining significant damage but avoiding a killing blow. Eventually, as darkness fell and fuel concerns mounted, the Badsworth rejoined the convoy, leaving hydrophone buoys to track any underwater movement. The following morning, as the convoy continued its eastward journey toward Britain, Lieutenant Commander Hartley summoned his senior officers and technical staff to analyze the previous day's events. "The timing is what puzzles me," said Lieutenant Richard Thornby, the ship's engineering officer. "Sonar interference begins, lasts approximately 40 minutes, then clears, at which point we immediately detect a U-boat that had obviously been stalking us. Could the Germans have been testing some jamming device that malfunctioned?" suggested Navigation Officer Sublieutenant William Parker. "Possibly," Hartley replied. "But why deploy it briefly, then stop using it just when it would have been most valuable, during our attack?" The discussion continued without resolution until Petty Officer Wellesley from the sonar room made a tentative connection. "Sir, I've been reviewing the logs. This is the third time in 2 weeks we've experienced similar interference. Each episode lasted between 30 and 45 minutes. And each occurred," he consulted his notebook, "between 10:30 and 11:30 hours. Mid-morning," Hartley mused. "What happens aboard ship routinely at that time?" The question hung in the air until the ship's first lieutenant, Henry Blackwood, snapped his fingers. "Galley waste disposal. It's scheduled for after-breakfast cleanup, usually around 10:30. Hartley's eyes widened. "Get the cook up here." Immediately. Minutes later, a confused Edward Mackenzie stood at attention before the officers, his white uniform still bearing evidence of lunch preparations. "At ease, Chief," Hartley said, using the cook's informal title. "I have an unusual question. Your morning waste disposal. Exactly what goes into it, and how do you process it?" Mackenzie looked bewildered but answered promptly. "Standard food waste, sir. Peelings, bones, expired provisions, cooking oil, tea grounds. Per regulations, I add degreasing agent before flushing the system. And this happens daily at approximately the same time." "Yes, sir. After breakfast cleanup, usually between 10:30 and 11. Hartley and Thornby exchanged meaningful glances. "Chief Mackenzie," Hartley continued, "I'd like you to perform your waste disposal procedure exactly as usual tomorrow, but under observation. We may have stumbled onto something significant." The next morning, Lieutenant Thornby and Petty Officer Wellesley stood in the cramped galley watching Mackenzie's every move. As the cook prepared to flush the waste disposal system, sonar operators monitored their equipment with particular attention. The result was immediate and undeniable. The moment Mackenzie's mixture of food waste and degreasing agent entered the water, sonar readings became distorted with the same interference pattern they had observed previously. Thornby rushed to the bridge. "It's confirmed, sir. The galley waste is causing the sonar anomalies." Lieutenant Commander Hartley immediately grasped the implications. "If our sonar is affected, then U-boat hydrophones likely are too. We've accidentally been deploying an acoustic countermeasure." Within hours, Hartley had Mackenzie experimenting with different waste combinations, methodically documenting their acoustic effects. The cook, initially confused by the attention, quickly embraced his unexpected role in naval warfare. "It's the combination that matters," Mackenzie explained as he prepared another test mixture. "The organic waste alone doesn't do much. Add the degreaser, and there's some effect. But when I include used cooking oil and tea grounds, that's when the readings go haywire." Further testing revealed the scientific principles at work. The mixture created thousands of tiny bubbles that distorted sound waves passing through the water, essentially creating an acoustic smoke screen that confused both active and passive sonar systems. By coincidence, Dr. Eleanor Harrington, a civilian scientist with the Admiralty's Naval Research Laboratory, was traveling aboard the Convoy flagship as an observer. When informed of the Badsworth's discovery, she immediately recognized its potential. "It's a form of cavitation," she explained to the assembled officers. "The mixture creates microbubbles that scatter and absorb sound waves. We've been researching similar principles for months, but haven't achieved practical deployment." Hartley nodded thoughtfully. "And here our cook solved it with kitchen scraps." Mackenzie, unused to such attention, shifted uncomfortably. "Just doing my job, sir. Though if I'd known dumping tea grounds could sink U-boats, I'd have been brewing more." The laughter that followed eased the tension, but the serious implications were not lost on anyone. If properly developed, this accidental discovery could significantly impact the Battle of the Atlantic. Dr. Harrington worked with Mackenzie over the following days to refine the mixture and develop deployment methods. By the time the convoy reached Liverpool on October 23, 1942, they had created prototype devices that could be manufactured quickly and inexpensively. In London, initial skepticism from Admiralty officials quickly gave way to intense interest when trials confirmed the effectiveness of what was now being called Mackenzie's mixture. Admiral Sir Max Horton, Commander-in-Chief of Western Approach's command responsible for convoy protection, personally interviewed the cook and authorized immediate production. "You understand what you've given us, don't you, Chief?" Admiral Horton asked Mackenzie during their meeting. "A way to confuse German sonar, sir," Mackenzie replied simply. "More than that," Horton said. "You've given us time. Every convoy that reaches port safely means thousands more tanks, planes, and bullets for our boys. It means food for our civilians. Each ship that doesn't get torpedoed represents hundreds of lives saved." Production began in November 1942 under the codename Operation Bubble. The official designation for the devices was Type Q acoustic countermeasure, but sailors quickly dubbed them Mackenzie mixers, or simply bubbles. The deployment strategy was elegant in its simplicity. Small, canister-shaped devices containing Mackenzie's specially formulated mixture were dropped at regular intervals by escort vessels. When the canisters reached a predetermined depth, they released their contents, creating expanding clouds of acoustic-disrupting microbubbles. Convoys could lay down continuous, bubble curtains that significantly degraded U-boat hydrophone effectiveness. By January 1943, every North Atlantic convoy carried stocks of Mackenzie mixers. The effect on U-boat operations was immediate and dramatic. Captain Lieutenant Heinrich Schaefer, who had survived the attack from HMS Badsworth, documented his frustration in his patrol log during a January 18th encounter. Attempted approach on convoy HX 224. Hydrophone effectiveness severely compromised by unknown interference. Pattern suggests deliberate countermeasure rather than natural conditions. Forced to attempt visual acquisition despite dangerous air cover. Abandoned attack after destroyer spotted periscope. British scientific advancement continues to complicate our operations. Schaefer was not alone in his assessment. U-Boat Command noted a 37% decrease in successful attacks during the first quarter of 1943 compared to the previous 3 months. While multiple factors contributed to this decline, improved air cover, radar advances, and better escort tactics, post-war analysis would credit Mackenzie mixers with reducing successful U-boat approaches by approximately 22%. For the men who sailed the North Atlantic convoys, the psychological impact was perhaps even more significant than the statistical one. Knowing they had an effective countermeasure against the silent predators beneath the waves provided a crucial morale boost during the war's darkest days. Edward Mackenzie's contribution did not go unrecognized. In March 1943, he was awarded the Distinguished Service Medal for exceptional service and innovation leading to the protection of vital naval assets. More meaningful to the humble cook was his promotion to warrant officer, a significant advancement for a man who had joined the Navy with minimal formal education. The U-Boat Command, meanwhile, struggled to understand and counter the new Allied technology. German naval engineers correctly deduced the general principle but couldn't develop effective countermeasures. By mid-1943, improved Allied technologies, including aircraft-deployed sonobuoys, magnetic anomaly detection, and more powerful depth charges, combined with the acoustic disruption of Mackenzie mixers to make the Atlantic increasingly hazardous for U-boats. Captain Lieutenant Schaefer would experience this deteriorating situation firsthand. On April 7, 1943, U-612 was attacked by an RAF Coastal Command B-24 Liberator equipped with newly developed rocket projectiles. Though the submarine survived this encounter, it was sunk 3 weeks later by HMS Hesperus, which used Mackenzie mixers to close within lethal range without being detected. Of U-612's crew of 46, only 11 survived. Admiral Karl Donitz, commander of the German U-boat fleet, noted in his May 1943 report to Hitler, "The enemy has achieved superiority in detection and counter-detection measures that significantly compromises our operational effectiveness. Our technical advantages of 1940 to 1942 have been not only matched but exceeded." In June 1943, Edward Mackenzie was transferred to the Admiralty's Naval Research Laboratory, where he worked alongside Dr. Harrington and other scientists to further refine acoustic countermeasures. Though lacking scientific training, his practical experience and intuitive understanding of the principles involved proved invaluable. "The scientists have the knowledge, but Chief Mackenzie has the knack," Dr. Harrington told a colleague. "He can tell by looking at a mixture whether it will work effectively. We've run tests that confirm his instincts with mathematical precision, but he just knows." By late 1943, the tide of the Battle of the Atlantic had decisively turned. U-boat losses reached unsustainable levels, with 41 submarines destroyed in May 1943 alone. On May 24, Admiral Donitz temporarily withdrew U-boats from the North Atlantic, a tacit admission of defeat in what had been Germany's most promising campaign. The story of Mackenzie's discovery remained classified during the war, with only vague references to advanced countermeasures appearing in official communications. Even after the war, as other naval innovations were declassified and celebrated, the full account of the Cook's contribution remained obscured by bureaucratic oversight rather than deliberate secrecy. Edward Mackenzie returned to regular naval service in 1944, serving aboard HMS Belfast during the D-Day operations. After the war, he retired to his native Scotland, opening a small restaurant in Edinburgh that became known for its excellent fish and chips. Few of his customers knew that their cheerful, unassuming host had helped change the course of the war. The full story finally emerged in 1976 when historian Margaret Campbell, researching a comprehensive history of naval operations, discovered references to Mackenzie's mixture in declassified Admiralty files. Her subsequent investigation, including interviews with the then 76-year-old Mackenzie, brought the remarkable tale to public attention. "I just did what needed doing," Mackenzie told Campbell during their interview. "Same as everyone else during the war. Lucky accident, that's all it was." But Dr. Eleanor Harrington, by then Professor Emeritus of Marine Acoustics at Cambridge University, offered a different perspective. What Edward Mackenzie demonstrated wasn't just luck. It was the triumph of practical ingenuity over academic orthodoxy. The Naval Research Laboratory had brilliant minds working on acoustic countermeasures for years without success. Mackenzie solved the problem not despite his lack of formal education, but perhaps because of it. He wasn't constrained by theoretical limitations. The impact of Mackenzie's discovery extended beyond World War II. The principles behind his acoustic countermeasure informed post-war developments in submarine stealth technology, underwater acoustic research, and even modern sonar disrupting systems used by advanced navies worldwide. In a final historical irony, German naval records examined after the war revealed that Captain Lieutenant Schaefer had reported the unusual acoustic interference to U-boat headquarters after his October 1942 encounter with HMS Badsworth. His observations were deemed interesting but low priority by technical staff overwhelmed with analyzing more conventional Allied technologies. Had German command recognized the significance of Schaefer's report, they might have developed countermeasures before Mackenzie mixers became widely deployed. Instead, a Scottish cook's ingenious solution, born of daily routine and practical necessity, helped turn the tide in the Atlantic, saving countless lives and vital supplies. The Battle of the Atlantic, which Churchill described as the dominating factor all through the war, might have ended very differently without Edward Mackenzie's unlikely contribution. In his later years, Mackenzie would occasionally visit the Royal Navy Museum in Portsmouth, quietly standing before displays about the Battle of the Atlantic. When a small exhibit about acoustic countermeasures was finally added in 1982, including a photo of Mackenzie receiving his Distinguished Service Medal, he brought his grandchildren to see it. "Your granddad helped make these bubbles that confused the German submarines," he explained simply. "Kept our ships safe so food and supplies could get through." Perhaps the most fitting tribute came from Admiral Sir John Fieldhouse, First Sea Lord, during a 1985 ceremony honoring naval innovation. The story of Edward Mackenzie reminds us that in warfare, as in life, breakthrough solutions often come from unexpected sources. A naval cook with no scientific training developed what our finest minds could not: a simple, effective means of protecting the convoys that were Britain's lifeline. His story exemplifies the spirit of innovation and practical problem-solving that has always been the Royal Navy's greatest strength. Edward Mackenzie passed away peacefully in 1988 at the age of 88, having lived to see his contribution fully recognized and celebrated. The principles behind his discovery continue to influence underwater acoustics research to this day, a lasting legacy from a man who began each day simply trying to feed hungry sailors in the midst of humanity's greatest conflict. And that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II, and check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.